We were told the mission would be simple: observe, collect, and ridicule. Humanity, we were assured, was a curiosity, not a threat. The High Command instructed us to record their behaviors and laugh at their shortcomings, to prove once more that no species in this sector approached our brilliance. I carried that certainty into orbit and wore it like armor. After all, what danger could arise from a race so primitive they still worshipped glowing rectangles and greasy meats? Their world amused me immediately. From orbit it looked beautiful. Yes, blue seas, green continents, white storms curling like art across the surface. But beauty is only surface, and beneath it lay absurdity. The humans live surrounded by excess and chaos. They poison themselves with drinks laced in sugar, then complain of ailments they cause. They celebrate something called reality television, in which their kind argue loudly in kitchens and jungles for the amusement of others. They worship tiny symbols, faces drawn in circles, called emojis, as though meaning can be contained in yellow caricatures. And then there is their food, slabs of ground animal flesh wedged between bread, consumed with religious fervor. Such rituals must have meaning to them, though I fail to discern it. We descended through the atmosphere with ease. Their satellites did not notice, their telescopes did not blink. They have no orbital defenses, no fleet to challenge intrusion. To us, they're open fields waiting to be walked upon. Our landing was smooth, hidden in a jungle where vines strangle trees and insects scream at all hours. My companions disliked the place, the dampness, the crawling life, but I found it fitting. This was the habitat of the primitive. Here, among shadows and mud, we would select a subject to examine. The choice came quickly. A human male, perhaps mid-30s, crouched at the bank of a river. He had built a fire, over which he roasted a strip of meat skewered on a stick. His clothing was plain, utilitarian, lacking any flourish. No companions lingered nearby, no electronic devices, no pack animals. He was alone, unguarded, perfect for study. We activated the paralysis beam. He stiffened, the meat falling from his grasp, and collapsed onto the dirt. I expected panic to seize him in the final instant of awareness, as it does with lesser creatures. Instead, I met his eyes and found them steady, fixed, calculating. Even frozen, he did not blink. He simply looked at us as though he were taking measure. My scientist chuckled, declaring the specimen defective. "Instincts malfunctioning," she said. "He does not even fear." We carried him aboard without effort. He weighed little, his body fragile compared to ours. The ship's instruments scanned him as we ascended back into orbit. Everything matched expectations. Average intelligence, standard physiology, no visible threat. Yet his eyes continued to trouble me. They did not close when they should have. They lingered on us, unblinking, as though memorizing. In the containment chamber, I dictated the log. Subject: human male, age range mid-30s. Condition: stable. Tools: primitive rope, cutting implement, cylindrical object. Behavioral note: calm even under paralysis. Assessment: no threat. The words felt solid then, grounded in science. Still, I avoided looking directly at him as I spoke. His gaze unsettled me. The paralysis field should have induced unconsciousness. Yet his lips twitched. At first I assumed a spasm, but then it grew deliberate, curving upward into what humans call a smile. Muscular misfire, I told myself. Random, meaningless. And yet, the expression lingered, held with intent. We left him secured and retreated to the mess chamber. My crew replayed recordings of human absurdities for amusement. They laughed at a program in which humans race against clocks to prepare food, screaming at each other when bread fails to rise. They laughed harder at images of small domesticated beasts, cats, dressed in clothing. One officer remarked that Earth was a planet of comedy, not strategy. I pretended to share the laughter, but my thoughts remained in the chamber. When I returned alone, against protocol, he had not moved. The stasis field pulsed around him, flawless, unbroken. Yet his smile remained patient, deliberate. His eyes were closed now, but the expression suggested thought rather than unconsciousness. I stood for a long time watching him, listening to the hum of the systems, telling myself this was routine, ordinary, trivial. I recorded another log before retiring. Subject appears docile, compliant. Continued calmness under stasis. No anomalies detected. I ended the entry quickly, unwilling to describe the smile. To mention it would be to admit I found it worthy of note. But the truth pressed against my mind as I left the chamber. We had chosen him for his isolation, his vulnerability, his insignificance. We wanted simplicity, an easy first subject to prove our mission's ease. And yet, as the door sealed, I felt the weight of his expression follow me. Calmness is not the same as compliance. A smile is not always surrender. We had come to laugh at humanity, to showcase their weaknesses, to parade their absurdities before our command. And laugh we did. But even then, even before the first test, I wondered if the joke might not be ours to tell. The subject should not have awakened. The stasis field had been calibrated with precision. Our instruments confirmed a full neural lock, and every previous trial with lesser fauna had yielded consistent results. Yet, when I entered the chamber the following rotation, I was greeted not by a still form but by eyes. Open, clear, and watching. He had risen to a seated position, though no restraints had been disengaged, and he regarded me with a look I struggled to classify. It was not fear. It was not confusion. It was recognition, as though he had been expecting me. I demanded an explanation from my technicians. They insisted the containment protocols were flawless, that the readouts proved his brain was subdued, that such awakening was categorically impossible. And yet, there he was, perfectly awake, perfectly calm, regarding us as though we were the captives. "You're the commander," he said in a low voice. His accent was crude, but the meaning was unmistakable. "That one's the scientist." He inclined his chin toward my second, who stiffened at the recognition. Then he shifted his gaze toward the largest among us, a security officer whose armor gleamed beneath the chamber lights. Into the muscle, always the quiet ones. My companions exchanged uneasy glances. I maintained composure. It was clearly guesswork, primitive pattern recognition, coincidence dressed in confidence. Still, I felt a faint irritation that his guesses had been correct. I informed him that he was restrained, that he was in no position to speak, and that his analysis was meaningless. He smiled again, faint but deliberate. "Restraints don't last forever," he replied. "They only last as long as the system does." I dismissed the remark, though it lingered like grit in the back of my mind. He continued to speak, calm, steady, as though in polite conversation. He asked about the structure of our vessel, whether it was a long-range craft or a local scout. He commented on the hum of our engines, noting that one sounded slightly misaligned. He tilted his head toward the ceiling as though listening to our systems the way one might listen to a forest wind. My scientist grew impatient. She attempted to record his neural activity while he spoke, but the instruments yielded strange interference patterns, as though his words and thoughts were misaligned. "He should not be capable of this," she muttered. The paralysis field was disengaged without authorization. "His brain is adapting." I silenced her. Protocol demanded composure, not panic. To lose dignity before the subject was unthinkable. I leaned closer to him, ensuring my posture communicated control. "You are here for study," I told him. "Your behavior will be documented, your culture cataloged. You are not in command." His smile deepened slightly, no longer faint but edged with something I recognized far too well. Amusement at another's ignorance. "You think this is first contact," he said quietly. "You think you chose me." His eyes fixed on mine, unblinking. "But I've been watching you since before you landed." For the first time, I felt my equilibrium falter. He spoke with certainty, not conjecture. My mind reached for explanations. Perhaps our descent had been detected. Perhaps his species possessed rudimentary sensors we had overlooked. Yet none of these justifications accounted for the confidence in his tone. He was not guessing. He was stating. I attempted to reassert control. "Your awareness is irrelevant. You are one specimen among billions. We will study you, and you will be returned to your world none the wiser." He tilted his head, as if considering my words. Then, with disconcerting calm, he said, "I was awake the entire trip." My companions shifted uneasily. I forced a derisive laugh. Impossible. The paralysis field was thorough, the stasis chamber infallible. No creature could maintain awareness through it. Yet his voice contained no boast, no deception. It was a simple recitation of fact. He described details he could not have known. The number of corridors passed, the flicker of the containment lights during transfer, the moment when one of our systems faltered briefly upon re-entry into orbit. He even mimicked the rhythm of the alarms that had chimed only in the control room. Each detail was accurate. Each detail was damning. My scientist attempted to rationalize, muttering theories about subconscious perception or residual echoes of neural activity. But I recognized the truth, even if I refused to voice it. He had been awake, watching, cataloging us exactly as we had intended to catalog him. I tried to mask my unease with arrogance. "So you observed," I said coldly. "Observation is not power." He leaned back slightly, restraints creaking though they held. "Power," he murmured, "is knowing what you're up against before the first move." His gaze moved deliberately across each of us, weighing, measuring, dismissing. Then he looked back at me and smiled again. I ended the session abruptly. The others protested, demanding further scans, further data, but I silenced them with a command. We would regroup, reanalyze, and determine how best to proceed. The subject remained in his restraints, calm, patient, as though certain the next move would be his. In the corridor outside, my second whispered, "Commander, he is not normal." I snapped that, of course, he was not normal. That was why he had been chosen. But my words lacked conviction. His behavior gnawed at me. He should have been broken, compliant, bewildered. Instead, he seemed entirely unshaken, as if captivity was a familiar posture. I returned later, alone, against protocol. He was still there, still smiling faintly, as though waiting for me specifically. When I approached, he opened his eyes wider, calm and unwavering. "You're afraid," he said softly. I bristled. "I fear nothing primitive." "Not yet," he replied, and then he closed his eyes as though the conversation was over. The stasis field hummed around him, strong and unbroken. My instruments declared him secure. And yet, as I left the chamber, I felt less like a warden and more like a piece in a game whose rules I had not learned. That rotation, my log entry was uncharacteristically brief. I wrote only. "The subject has awakened prematurely. He exhibits confidence disproportionate to his condition. Further observation required." It was a factual statement, stripped of commentary, devoid of mockery. For the first time since our arrival on Earth, I found nothing worth laughing at. And yet, though my words were measured, my thoughts betrayed me. I had watched many prisoners over my career. They all pleaded, protested, or despaired. This one smiled, and, as much as I tried to dismiss it, I began to suspect that smile was not an accident, not a reflex, but a warning. The third rotation began with renewed determination. I would strip the mystery from this human, expose his calmness as a trick of chemistry or chance. My team gathered in the observation chamber, equipment calibrated, neural scanners primed. The subject was secured, his body confined, his mind supposedly open to analysis. I reassured my subordinates that today we would restore clarity. And yet, as the chamber lights rose and his eyes opened once more, clarity fled. He smiled again, that same deliberate curve, as though he had been waiting for us all night. We began the cognitive probes, low-frequency pulses meant to unravel thought patterns. He did not resist. Instead, he welcomed them, tilting his head slightly as if amused by the sensation. "Feels like a dentist chair," he muttered. My translator rendered the words, but the context baffled us. When pressed, he added, "Don't worry. This won't hurt me." The arrogance in his tone struck me like a mirror image of my own. The scans should have revealed linear activity, simple webs of neural function consistent with primate brains. Instead, the readings fractured, spiked, and overwhelmed the instruments. My scientist adjusted parameters, recalibrated, attempted deeper scans, but the interference only worsened. It was not resistance in the conventional sense. It was as though his brain was aware of our probes and adjusting itself to confuse them. The patterns bent, folded, and rearranged with a fluidity we had never observed. He chuckled softly. "Your cameras are 2 degrees off axis," he said without opening his eyes. "I can feel them watching." My scientist cursed under her breath, checking alignments, only to discover he was correct. The calibration had drifted. Coincidence, I told myself, though the unease in her face betrayed agreement with my doubts. We increased intensity. He responded not with pain, but with commentary. Lines from what we later discovered were human films. "I'll be back. Houston, we have a problem. Say hello to my little friend." Each delivered with perfect timing, each mocking the solemnity of our study. I demanded silence, but he ignored me, turning instead to the guard. "You don't talk much, do you? Strong type. But you played football." The guard stiffened, muttering that he did not understand the reference. The human smirked as if he had scored a point in a contest only he understood. The readings escalated. His brain waves surged beyond expected capacity, triggering alarms. My instruments whined, overloaded by data they could not interpret. He opened his eyes then, meeting mine with a steadiness that pierced. "You don't like the numbers, do you?" he asked softly. I bristled. "Your abnormality is irrelevant. We will uncover the truth." "The truth," he repeated, almost savoring the word. Then he leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed. "The truth is, I've seen inside your systems already. I know where your power runs. I know where your air flows. I know where your fear begins." My crew recoiled, their composure cracking. I barked at them to remain calm, but my voice sounded hollow in my ears. "You are speaking nonsense," I insisted. He shook his head slowly. "I was trained to see weaknesses. It's what I do. You should have picked someone else." It was then that I demanded to know who he was, what role he played on his world. His answer arrived with the same maddening calmness. "Once," he said, "I was a Navy SEAL. Now I work in security testing and counterintelligence. My job is to break into places that think they're unbreakable. Congratulations, you've just volunteered for a demonstration." My second laughed nervously, hoping to dispel the tension, but the sound faltered in the air. The words hung like a blade above us all. His calmness was not madness, not luck, but discipline forged in training designed to dismantle the confident. I pressed further, demanding detail, but he merely smiled again. "Details aren't free," he said. "You should know that. But I'll tell you this. I've already sent a message." The chamber went cold. My team froze, disbelief etched across their features. A message? Impossible. No signals have been transmitted, no systems compromised. Our vessel was secure, silent, invisible to Earth's clumsy instruments. Yet he spoke with such certainty that my own convictions wavered. I told him he was bluffing. He shrugged. "Maybe, but you don't know for sure, do you? That's the problem. Doubt spreads faster than fire." The words struck deeper than I wanted to admit. My crew exchanged uncertain glances, their faith in me trembling. I silenced them with a glare, but inside, a seed had been planted. We attempted one final probe, pushing the scanners to maximum. The machinery roared, bathing him in light. His body convulsed briefly, but then he laughed, a low, steady laugh that reverberated through the chamber. The readings spiraled into chaos, filling our displays with symbols we could not parse. Then abruptly the systems shut down, every instrument dark. The silence was suffocating. Emergency lights flickered, casting shadows across his face. His smile remained. "You really shouldn't have done that," he murmured. I slammed the emergency cutoff, restoring minimal power. The scanners rebooted, but the data was gone, erased as if overwritten. My scientist insisted it was a malfunction, but the human's expression told me otherwise. He had done something. Somehow, impossibly, he had used our own equipment against us. I leaned close, searching for any sign of deception. "What did you do?" I demanded. He met my gaze without flinching. "I told you already," he said softly. "I sent a message, and now you've given me everything I need." My hand tightened around the edge of the console. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. For the first time in my career, I felt not superiority, but vulnerability. His calmness was no longer amusing. It was terrifying. I ended the session abruptly, ordering the chamber sealed. As the door closed, I caught one last glimpse of him leaning back, eyes half closed, smiling as if the entire encounter had played exactly as he intended. That night, my log entry was shorter still. The subject demonstrates awareness beyond acceptable parameters. He claims external communication, confidence rising, recommend heightened security. But I knew security was meaningless. For all our advancement, for all our arrogance, we were no longer the observers. We were the observed. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of our ship, I felt the first flicker of something I had never admitted to feeling before. Fear. The alarms began without warning. One moment our vessel thrummed with the steady pulse of systems in harmony, and the next the lights flickered, consoles stuttered, and the air vibrated with a sound I had never heard. Uncertainty. My officers scrambled to restore order, shouting diagnostics, demanding answers, but their voices overlapped into noise. I stood frozen, watching displays collapse into static, listening to the ship groan like a living creature under strain. In the heart of the chaos sat the human, restrained, calm, and smiling. The first failures were small. A door locked itself in the wrong position, trapping 2 technicians inside a corridor. They pounded until the system reset and freed them, shaken but unharmed. Then the environmental filters cycled irregularly, releasing bursts of mist into the air as though the jungle itself had crept aboard. My engineer swore it was coincidence, a cascade of minor malfunctions. But I knew better. The human had warned us. Restraints only last as long as the system does. His words echoed, now like prophecy. We rushed to isolate him, sever the scanners, shut down every channel that connected his body to our vessel. The restraints hummed with renewed force. Yet even sealed within the containment field, his presence radiated control. He leaned back, relaxed, as though the panic around him were a performance stage for his amusement. Funny thing about systems, he said softly, voice carrying even over the alarms. They always assume the threat comes from outside, never from the inside. I barked at him to explain. He merely tilted his head. I told you. I sent a message. The words ignited dread among my officers. One asked what kind of message, to whom, on what channel. He offered no clarification. Instead, the ship shuddered, lights dimming to blood-red emergency glow. Our AI, the flawless intelligence that guided every function, fell silent. The silence was worse than alarms. It meant something greater had taken hold. We attempted manual overrides, but access codes failed, passwords rejected. Consoles responded with unfamiliar symbols, twisted echoes of our own language. The human's eyes flickered open, catching the red light. Nice interface, he murmured, but a little too trusting. My security officer suggested lethal force. Terminate him, he said. End the interference at the source. His hand hovered over the release for a weapon. Yet before I could respond, the containment chamber itself locked, seals glowing as though bound by our own systems against us. We could not open it, not even to carry out execution. The irony was suffocating. Our ship protected him from us. I demanded to know how. He explained with unnerving patience, as though instructing children. You scanned my mind, he said. Bad idea. While you were mapping me, I was mapping you. Every pulse, every frequency, every pathway, mirrored back. You gave me the keys, and you didn't even notice. The weight of his words crushed the last remnants of my arrogance. We had believed ourselves the observers, yet we had exposed our own machinery through curiosity. We had handed him the structure of our ship like a blueprint. Now he wielded it against us without moving a muscle. Panic spread. Sections of the vessel sealed one by one. Crew were cut off, isolated, their voices frantic across comms, until even comms dissolved into silence. The human spoke again, conversational, calm, as though offering comfort. You don't understand, Earth. You think we're primitives because we eat fast food and watch reality TV. But we train people like me to see threats where others see nothing, to break systems that think they're unbreakable. We hide our teeth until someone's foolish enough to look inside. He paused, then added with a faint grin, and I'm not even the best we have. My officers beg me for guidance. I had none. Every action was anticipated, every attempt countered. We tried to shut down power entirely, but backup systems surged in ways we could not control. He had taken the AI, bent it, repurposed it. The ship no longer served us. It served him. At one point, he mentioned names we did not understand. Florida Man Chuck Norris. He spoke them with a hint of reverence, as though invoking gods. My crew flinched at the unknown. When he added, and duct tape. Never underestimate duct tape. Even I felt the absurdity twist into menace. We did not understand, and in not understanding, we feared. Hours passed in torment. The human never rose, never strained against his bonds. He simply sat, smiling faintly, guiding our collapse with words and presence alone. My confidence, once unshakable, eroded with every flicker of failing light. At last, when the ship lay quiet, when half my crew had been locked in compartments we could no longer reach, when the AI whispered only in fragments that echoed the human's cadence, he leaned forward. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of inevitability. Earth isn't weak. It pretends to be. You looked at hamburgers and cat videos and thought that was the measure of us. But we've been watching, waiting, building in silence. You picked the wrong test subject. I stared at him, and for the first time in my long career, words abandoned me. I had no rebuttal, no dismissal, no sarcasm to shield my pride. Only silence. He closed his eyes then, as though dismissing me, as though the game was finished. The restraints still bound his body, but it no longer mattered. He had already escaped in every way that counted. My final log was not written for my superiors. It was not written for the record. It was written for myself, carved into the core of my memory, so that when others ask what became of us, I will have an answer. We came to study the primitive. We came to laugh at their follies, their foods, their foolishness, and laugh we did, until the laughter curdled into silence. The human did not need weapons, nor armies, nor violence. He needed only calmness, patience, and the arrogance of those who believe themselves superior. Now I sit in the dark of my failing ship, surrounded by whispers of systems no longer mine, watching the faint glow of the containment chamber where one man rests with eyes closed and a smile that will not fade. I understand now that he is not smiling at us. He is smiling at what comes next. We thought Earth was prey. We thought ourselves hunters. But in this jungle, in this silence, in this smile, I see the truth. The jungle belongs to him. And for the first time, I fear that the galaxy does too.